Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. Today we are going to be talking about features that define civilization. Now this video is for my world history class, so if you're not in world history, you're watching the wrong video. So, we are going to be talking today about the features that define what a civilization actually is. Now if I asked you what a civilization was, you'd probably be able to tell me parts of it, but what goes into making up the definition of a civilization? Well, there are 7 key characteristics, and we are going to talk about those today. The first one is organized governments. To produce large amounts of food and oversee irrigation projects, new forms of government arose. At first, priests probably had the greatest power. In time, warrior kings emerged as the chief political leaders. They replaced the old councils of elders and set themselves up as hereditary rulers who passed power from father to son. So, in the earliest history, we had councils of elders. It was just the oldest people in the clan or tribe or whatever their community unit was. And then priests. After they kind of went by the wayside, we had priests that were the were probably who held the political power. They were the religious leaders and also political leaders, but eventually we're going to have these warrior kings come to power, and they are hereditary rulers, meaning whenever the current warrior king dies or has to retire from ruling for whatever reason, his son would take over. Now, almost always, rulers claimed that their right to rule came from the gods. Thus, they gained and held religious as well as political power. This is known as divine right. So, these warrior kings said that they were chosen by their gods to be the ruler of their people. And it made a very convincing argument, because these early civilizations, well, they didn't want to go against the gods. The gods dictated the weather, dictated childbirth, dictated war, trade, all these different aspects of their life that was very important. So they're not going to go against the gods. They don't want to have the gods upset with them. So if this person says that he was chosen by God to be the ruler, well, let him rule. And this claim that their authority comes from God, comes from their God, was the idea of divine right. Speaking of gods, we have complex religions. Most ancient people were polytheistic, which means they believed in many gods. People appealed to sun gods, river goddesses, and other spirits that they believed controlled natural forces. Other gods were thought to control human activities such as birth, trade, or war. So, like I was just saying, these early civilizations believed that these many gods were in charge of all these different aspects of their life, and they're not going to make the gods upset with them. They want the gods on their side. So, they're going to go along with these warrior kings claiming divine right. Also, if you notice, the word polytheistic is underlined and highlighted. Probably means that's an important word. You might want to keep that in mind for your quiz on Friday. Continuing on, in ancient religions, priests and worshippers sought to gain the favor of the gods through complex rituals such as ceremonies, dances, prayers, and hymns. These were all religious practices that the priests and the worshippers engaged in. To ensure divine help, people built temples and sacrificed animals, crops, or sometimes other humans to the gods. Human sacrifice was a practice that was engaged in by some people, and depending on the culture that you are looking at, some cultures saw being sacrificed to the gods as a great honor, that you were going to garner favor for your family or your clan or your tribe by making this sacrifice yourself. Now, other cultures, they would sacrifice prisoners, captives, criminals, the people that they really didn't want around anyway, and then they would use them as human sacrifices. So it really wasn't seen as an honorific sort of thing. It just varied from culture to culture. Next, we have job specialization. Urban people developed so many new crafts that a single individual could not master all the skills needed to make tools, weapons, or other goods. For the first time, individuals began to specialize in certain jobs. Some became artisans, or skilled craftspeople, who made pottery, finely carved statues, or woven goods. So, these artisans are people who are going to practice in occupations and jobs that isn't necessarily food production. This is something that was allowed for due to agriculture. Metalworking was particularly important. People learned to make tools and weapons first out of copper and later out of bronze, a more durable mixture of copper and tin. So if you're ever wondering what bronze was made out of, it is a mix of copper and tin. Social classes. People were ranked according to their jobs, which led to the growth of social classes. Priests and nobles usually occupied the top level of an ancient society. Next came a small class of wealthy merchants, followed by artisans. Below them stood the vast majority of people, peasant farmers who lived in the surrounding villages and produced food for the city. So this social class pyramid, as the picture shows here, at the top, you're going to have your priests and your nobles. This is like the ruling family, your religious leaders, those kind of people are going to be at the top of society. And at the bottom are the peasants, are the everyday people, farmers, or depending on the culture, if they had slaves, slaves were going to be in the lowest social level. Poor families sometimes sold family members into slavery to pay their debts. So, some cultures practiced slavery, others did not, but the ones that did practice slavery, it was common practice, if your family was in debt, to sell a family member into slavery in order to resolve your debts. Next up is arts and architecture. The arts and architecture of ancient civilizations express the talents, beliefs, and values of the people who created them. Temples and palaces often dominated the city landscape, reassuring people of the strength and power of their government and religion. So these ancient buildings, these ancient architecture, a lot of it was kind of a way to brag about how powerful their culture was or how great their god was. It was seen as a form of worship, as a way to sort of like, hey, look at me, look how great we are. Look at this amazing thing that we built. So that's what a lot of ancient architecture was. It was sort of a demonstration of your knowledge, your power, and your wealth. Public works. Linked to the temples and palaces in the cities were vast public works that strong rulers ordered to be built. These were projects included irrigation systems, roads, bridges, and defensive walls. So these public works is another word for just public buildings that were good for the public. Roads, bridges, things that the general public can use that is for the betterment of the community. In the modern day, public works would be things like parks, schools, roads and bridges still. Anything that is built for the good of the community. That would be a public work. These projects were costly, requiring masses of human labor and sometimes even the lives of the workers. Still, they were meant to benefit the city, protect it from attack, ensure its food supply, and, of course, enhance the reputation of its ruler. Once again, this is another thing that was one of the purposes was to show off their wealth, their power, their influence. So this was these public works. While they were good for the community, they also were just to kind of show off a little bit. Writing. Almost all early civilizations developed a critical skill, writing. Writing may have begun in temples where priests needed to record precise rituals and prayers, accurate information about the seasons, and amounts of grain collected. A lot of early writing was religious in nature. Early writing was often made up of pictographs or pictograms, which were simple drawings that look like the objects they represent. So before humans developed letters and words and sentences and things like that we use today, they would draw little pictures of what they were referring to. You know, simple enough. You know, whenever they were wanting to record how many, how much wheat that they had produced, they would draw little sheets of wheat. And that is what they would use for the word wheat. As writing grew more complex, only specially trained people called scribes could read and write. Scribes were educated in temple schools and kept records for priests, rulers, and merchants. So scribes, another word that's underlined, by the way, hint, hint. Scribes were these specially trained people that could read and write. And whenever they had scribes, they were used whenever they actually had like letters and writing, and it wasn't just these simple little pictures that they were using. But whenever they had actual words, like you're reading right now, they had to train people in order to read and write. And this was a specialized skill that not everybody had. Very few people in ancient civilizations could actually read, because it wasn't seen as a vitally important thing. They only needed some people to know how to read and write, and that was all they needed. Okay, so here is a chart that gives a quick rundown on all of the basic features of civilization. If you want to, I'm not going to read the chart to you, but if you want to pause it here and take a look so that you get like a quick little definition of all of the features of civilizations, you can do that. Like I said, I'm not going to read it to you, but if you want to pause it and read it there, now would be a good time to do that. Civilizations change. All societies and civilizations change. In fact, history itself might be defined as the story of these changes. Ancient civilization changed in many ways over time. Among the chief causes of change were shifts in the physical environment and interactions among people. So, the environment is going to play a major role in the change over time of civilizations. So, the effect of the environment. Like their Stone Age ancestors, people in early civilizations depended heavily on the physical environment. They needed ample rain and fertile soil to produce crops. Significant changes in the environment could have an immediate impact on people's lives. At times, sudden drastic events such as an earthquake, flood, or volcano could devastate a community. Survivors had to rebuild on the ruins, and farming the same land year after year could reduce soil fertility. I mean, in our recent history, in our country, just in the last few weeks, we have seen rampant flooding in the southern part of the country with the hurricane. We saw flooding in New York City. I'm sure if you were paying attention on the news or on social media, you probably saw videos of the subway system just with water just gushing into it. Like, it's, you know, in these ancient civilizations, a flood like that could devastate a whole community, wipe it out completely. And there's numerous examples of that throughout history, of these massive natural disasters just completely wiping out civilizations. Environmental catastrophes, whether sudden or slow, could force people to abandon cities and migrate to new areas. Like I said, we see examples of this time and time again. Okay, cultural diffusion. Now, obviously, the picture I've included on this slide is not representative of any sort of ancient cultures. It is a rather modern one, and I think it illustrates what cultural diffusion is very easily. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't read what that sign says. However, I am pretty confident that if I went into this store, that that sign was outside of, they'd probably be selling burgers and fries. And why is that? Well, as I'm sure you are very well aware of, that's a McDonald's sign. We know because of the logo, the color, and it's just a very familiar image to us. We can't read that text. Or maybe you can. If you can, that's impressive. I can't read it. But I know that that probably says McDonald's. Or whatever the equivalent of McDonald's is in their culture. So, what is cultural diffusion? Change often came as a result of cultural diffusion. It's the spread of ideas, customs, and technologies from one people to another. Cultural diffusion occurred through migration, trade, and warfare. So it's the spread of ideas, the spread of customs, technology, religion, food. Yes, food was culturally diffused. You know, different foods in different areas. Other cultures, other areas started preparing food in that way, and that was also spread around as a new ideas. So I just thought this picture illustrated cultural diffusion pretty well. Cities become city-states. Some Neolithic cities expanded to become city-states. A city-state is a political unit that includes a city and its surrounding lands and villages. Peasants in these surrounding lands had to give a significant portion of each harvest to support the government and temples. Sumerian civilization in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley consisted of a number of rival city-states. So, for example, a city-state. Now, today we don't have city-states. But a city-state, I think the closest sort of modern equivalent to a city-state would be a county. You know, so for example, if there was a city-state and New Martinsville was the center of that city-state, the New Martinsville city-state, then they would probably claim like parts of Proctor, Doolin, out towards Middleburn, all of those areas would all become part of New Martinsville's territory as the city-state. And so the people that lived in those places outside of the city limits of New Martinsville would still be considered part of New Martinsville if New Martinsville was a city-state. Now, like I said, today I think the most equivalent sort of modern equivalent to a city-state would be like a county. You know, all of what's, you know, people who are in Proctor, who are in New Martinsville, who are in Doolin, and on down south into Paden City and Hundred, you know, they're all part of Wetzel County. Now, back in this day, it could have spread to be the Wetzel City-State. But I would say, think of these kind of like counties. It's the center hub and the surrounding areas. So, like I said, if New Martinsville was a city-state, it would count the city of New Martinsville, and then all of the surrounding countryside would be part of this one unit. So, we have city-states, and now we're going to start to look at empires. During ancient times, ambitious rulers conquered a wide swath of land that included many cities and villages. They created the first empires. An empire is a group of states or territories controlled by one ruler. For the conquered people, defeat was often painful and cruel. The rulers of these empires imposed their government and tried to ensure peace and order on many people. So, if you were the ruler of an empire, whenever you rolled into this area and conquered it, you would assume control, you would take over, and these people had to follow your rule or they would probably be put to death. So that is what an empire is. And that is what the, going forward, we are going to be studying different empires. Alright guys, I know this video is a little longer than the last one. I do apologize for that, but that is where we are going to end it today. So, If you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me. You can contact me through Schoology, email. You know the different ways to get a hold of me if you have any questions or have any concerns. So just get a hold of me if you need me. I hope we are back in the classroom very soon. I hope everybody's having a great day, and I will see you next time.